sisters. In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to study the Bible by doing 5 really simple things. The first one is to pray, right? We always want to pray before we study the Bible. The second is react. Third is reflect. Fourth is search. And 5 is determine. Keep watching. I'm going to get into each one now. Before we read the Bible, we always want to pray. We want to pray so that we can invite God into our study session, right? The Spirit is the one who teaches us all things. And Christ also says you have one teacher who is the Christ. So when we're studying, we're trying to learn things, and it's God who gives us discernment. But God is a gentleman, so invite him. Invite him into your study session. And I believe that he'll be there, and I believe he will, and I believe your study session will be all the more fruitful when you pray and invite God into your session. The second thing you want to do when you're reading the Bible is to react. And this is true for everything that you read ever. React to what you're reading. How do you do that? You do that by having a pencil or a pen in your hand. And you're not reacting doesn't mean you're underlining things or you're highlighting things that are important to you that you read. Reacting means taking that pen or pencil and writing down what you think about what you just read, a comment about what you just read, a question about what you just read. That is reacting to the Bible, right? We're not just going to circle things and highlight things. We're going to take a piece of paper or our iPad or even type if that's what you feel like doing, and you're going to type or write down what you think about a verse, right? Your first thoughts. You're going to write down any questions you have about the verse because you might not understand it. You might have no idea what that says, and you can just write down the verse to search for it, right? To search meaning for it later on. That's one of my other steps. And then, that's how you react to what you're reading, right? You're going to write something you think, you might have a comment, you're going to write it down, or you're going to have a question and you're going to write it down. We're not just circling and we're not just highlighting during our Bible studies. The next thing you want to do when you're doing your Bible study is reflect on whatever you reacted on, right? So you're going to reflect on whatever you wrote down, meaning the best way to reflect is to ask questions. So let's say you just had a thought about a verse. Ask yourself, is that true? What else could this mean, right? What else could this thought mean? Why did I have this thought? What part of the Bible, what is it about this verse that made me think this, right? That's reflecting, those are critical thinking skills. And you also, obviously you don't have to reflect on your questions, that's gonna come up next, right? You can reflect on your question if you'd like. You can say, why is this question important to me? Why is it important? And that's actually very important, because sometimes we read the Bible, or there are so many people that I've met that ask me things about the Bible, and I'm like, that's what you want to ask me? Like, why? Why is that what you want to know? Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes to me, I think if you want to gain the most spiritual knowledge, there is a right question, right? And there is a right way to think. You're not going to get anywhere in your walk with Christ or with God if you only ever ask God, how did you do that? How did you part the sea? How did you how did you make manna fall from the sky? Is it manna? Was that what it is? The bread? How did you make water come out of a rock? How did you feed 5,000? If you keep asking, like, if those are your questions, I wouldn't say those are good questions. I don't think it really matters how God does things. I think what matters is that He can and He will and He does. So I'd stay away from the how questions and move more towards what, where, why, those questions. I don't think how God does something is really going to increase your spiritual knowledge. The fourth step in the way I study my Bible is to search, right? Search and see if what I think about a verse is true. Are there other scholars who think the same thing? And if there aren't, I'll do search and determine at the same time, right? If there aren't any scholars that think what I think about a verse, then does that mean what I think isn't true? You have to determine. Are you going to agree with a Bible scholar simply because he's a Bible scholar? That's up for you to decide. There are many times that I've written things down and I've thought about things, and then I've searched for understanding, and I'll look it up to see what other people think about the verse or whatever, and they might think something different, or something differently, and I might say, that's actually a much better understanding, and that makes a lot more sense. So, and that's what I would determine. But there are some times where I'll read a verse and I'll believe it says something, and whatever I believe, that's the hill I'm gonna die on. And I might not agree with another Bible scholar, right? Some things are up for debate. There have to be, just because a Bible scholar says it, it doesn't mean that it's true, right? And you have to determine, you have to ask God for discernment and determine, is what they're saying is true, or what part of what they're saying is true, or is this whole thing true? Ask God for discernment and He will help you 100%. I can't imagine any reason God wouldn't want to help you discern what is true, especially if it's about His own word. Okay? So, and don't think, right? Don't be the person who just believes in every single thought you have. It's really important to search to see what other people think about the same thing that you studied, right? You don't want to, just because you thought something about a verse, it doesn't mean that it's true. And as I just said before, somebody else could probably explain it in a better way. And we have to be humble enough to say, oh, that's actually a much better interpretation of what I just read, and that makes a lot more sense. Okay? So to conclude this video, remember, when you're doing your Bible study, pray, invite God into your session, react by writing things down, reflect on what you wrote down, search to see what other people think about what you studied, and determine. Are you gonna determine, did that person explain it in a way, or does that person think of that verse in a better way than you do? Or do you really strongly believe in what you originally thought, right? You get to decide. And of course, be humble, right? Be willing to accept that maybe somebody else has a better understanding than you do. And also, of course, when you pray, I'm going to go right back to that, ask God for discernment, you know, when you're reading His Word, so that He can teach you better. And again, last thing I want to say here, stay away from those how questions. How did this happen? Stay away from not how did this happen, because how can be a good question for certain events that happened in the Bible, but I would stay away from how did God do this question, because I don't think that those questions will be very fruitful. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that these steps that I take when I study the Bible help you in your walk with Christ.